The morning light filtered through my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the granite countertop where I stood clutching my coffee mug with trembling hands. The ceramic felt warm against my palms, but nothing could chase away the cold dread that had settled in my chest after what I'd just overheard. The familiar scent of French roast, usually so comforting, now seemed bitter and overwhelming as steam rose from the dark liquid. I had been reaching for my reading glasses on the kitchen island when I heard Michael's voice drifting from his home office down the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and his words carried clearly through the quiet house. "I'm really concerned about Elena's mental state lately," he was saying into his phone, his tone carefully measured and full of what sounded like genuine worry. "She's been acting so erratic, so unpredictable. I don't know how much more I can handle." My breath caught in my throat. Elena? He was talking about me, his wife of 32 years, to someone on the other end of that line. The hardwood floor felt unsteady beneath my bare feet as I pressed myself against the cool wall, straining to hear more. Before I share this shocking experience, please show your support with a like and subscribe. Comment your location below. My name is Elena Ortiz. I'm 56 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew the man I married. The house around me suddenly felt foreign, despite the family photos lining the hallway walls and the throw pillows I'd carefully arranged on our leather sofa just yesterday. Everything looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted, like looking at a familiar room through a funhouse mirror. Michael continued his conversation, and I could hear the soft creak of his desk chair as he leaned back. The mood swings, the paranoia, the way she questions everything I say. I've been walking on eggshells for months. His voice carried that particular cadence he used when he wanted to sound reasonable and concerned, the same tone he employed during his business calls when explaining complex problems to clients. The kitchen tiles were cold against my feet as I stood there, paralyzed by disbelief. This was Michael Hartley, my husband, the man who brought me coffee in bed every Sunday morning and still held my hand during movies. Michael, with his salt and pepper beard that scratched my cheek when he kissed me goodbye each morning, was painting me as mentally unstable to someone on the phone. Through the window, I could see our neighbor Mrs. Chen tending to her rose garden, completely oblivious to the fact that my world was crumbling 20 feet away. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal against the chaos erupting in my mind. Her yellow gardening gloves moved methodically as she deadheaded the pink blooms, and I found myself envying her peaceful morning routine. My daughter Sophia's framed graduation photo from law school caught my eye from the kitchen counter, her confident smile now seeming like a lifeline. Sophia Ortiz had inherited my determination and her father's analytical mind. But more importantly, she had always been my anchor during difficult times. At 28, she possessed a sharp intuition that had served her well in her legal career, and she would see through any manipulation immediately. The conversation from Michael's office continued, and I heard him mention our mutual friend Rebecca Walsh, a woman I'd known since college. "Rebecca's noticed it too," Michael was saying. "Just last week at the barbecue, she pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay with Elena. She said Elena seemed agitated, almost manic." My stomach dropped. Rebecca Walsh had been my friend for over 25 years. We'd shared countless dinners, vacation photos, and late-night conversations about everything from career struggles to parenting challenges. Her curly red hair and infectious laugh had been a constant in my life through job changes, my mother's death, and every major milestone. The idea that she was discussing my supposed mental health behind my back felt like a physical blow. I set my coffee mug down on the counter with shaking hands, the ceramic making a sharp clink that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet kitchen. The sound made me wince, and I glanced nervously toward Michael's office, afraid he might have heard. But his voice continued its steady stream of concerned observations about his allegedly unstable wife. The morning sun had climbed higher, and the kitchen was now fully bathed in golden light that should have felt warm and welcoming. Instead, it felt harsh and exposing, like standing under fluorescent lights in a hospital waiting room. I could smell the lingering scent of the vanilla candle I'd burned the night before, mixed with the coffee and something else, something that reminded me of disappointment and broken trust. My wedding ring caught the light as I rubbed my temples, trying to process what I was hearing. The small diamond that had once symbolized eternal love now felt heavy and foreign on my finger. 32 years of marriage, and this was how it might end? With whispered phone calls and manufactured concerns about my sanity? I needed to understand what was really happening. Was this some elaborate setup to make leaving me seem justified? Had Michael been planning this campaign against my reputation for weeks, months? The questions multiplied in my mind like invasive weeds, choking out rational thought and replacing it with a growing sense of betrayal. And that's when the pattern snapped into place. The sound of Michael ending his phone call drifted from his office, followed by the familiar creak of his desk chair as he leaned back. I stood frozen in the kitchen, my bare feet rooted to the cool hardwood floor, unsure whether to confront him immediately or retreat to process what I'd overheard. The morning light streaming through our bay window had shifted, casting longer shadows across the breakfast table where we'd shared coffee and newspapers for decades. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my phone, scrolling through recent messages with Rebecca. There, just 3 days ago, was her usual friendly text about meeting for lunch next week, complete with her characteristic overuse of exclamation points and heart emojis. Nothing in her tone suggested concern about my mental state. Nothing that indicated she'd been discussing me with my husband behind my back. The vanilla scent from last night's candle had faded, replaced by the sharper smell of brewing anxiety that seemed to emanate from my own skin. I pressed my back against the kitchen counter, the granite edge cool through my cotton pajama top, and tried to steady my breathing. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had been tainted by Michael's calculated words. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, the familiar pattern of his morning routine as he headed toward the kitchen for his second cup of coffee. 32 years of marriage had made his habits as predictable as sunrise, yet now even these mundane sounds carried an undercurrent of deception that made my stomach churn. "Morning, sweetheart," he said as he entered the kitchen, his voice carrying that same concerned, slightly patronizing tone I'd heard through the office door. He moved past me to refill his mug, and I caught the scent of his aftershave, the same brand he'd worn since we were newlyweds. Now it smelled cloying, artificial. "How did you sleep?" he asked, turning to face me with what I now recognized as a practiced expression of worry. His gray eyes, once so familiar and comforting, seemed to be studying me, cataloging my reactions for future conversations with friends and possibly lawyers. "Fine," I managed, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Who were you talking to so early?" The question hung between us like smoke, and I watched as something flickered across his features. Not quite guilt, but a careful recalibration of his expression. "Oh, just Tom from the office," he said easily, adding cream to his coffee with deliberate focus. "We're trying to sort out the Morrison account before the meeting this afternoon." The lie slipped from his lips with such practiced ease that I wondered how many others I'd missed over the years. Tom worked in accounting, not client relations, and the Morrison account had been closed for months. I knew this because Michael had complained about losing it over dinner just last week. My wedding ring caught the light again as I set down my mug, and I found myself twisting it around my finger, a nervous habit I'd developed during my mother's final illness. The gesture felt loaded with meaning now, as if I were already loosening the bonds that had held us together for 3 decades. "Elena," Michael said softly, and I looked up to find him watching me with that manufactured concern again. "Are you feeling okay? You seem a little anxious this morning." The irony was so thick I could taste it, bitter and metallic on my tongue. Here he was, creating the very anxiety he claimed to be worried about, like a doctor poisoning a patient and then expressing concern about their declining health. "I'm fine," I repeated, but even to my own ears, the words sounded sharp and defensive. Exactly the kind of response that would support his narrative of instability. Michael nodded slowly, as if my tone confirmed something he'd suspected. "I just want you to know that I'm here if you need to talk about anything. Sometimes stress can manifest in ways we don't expect." The kitchen walls seemed to close in around me, the familiar space transforming into something claustrophobic and threatening. The cheerful yellow paint I'd chosen 5 years ago during our last renovation now looked garish, almost manic, in the morning light. Even my own home was becoming evidence against me. I needed space to think, to understand the full scope of what was happening. "I think I'll go shower," I said, moving toward the doorway with as much casual grace as I could muster. "Good idea," Michael replied, and there was something in his tone that made me pause. Maybe afterwards we could talk about scheduling that appointment with Dr. Peterson. Dr. Peterson was our family physician, a kind man in his 60s who treated everything from my occasional migraines to Michael's high blood pressure. The suggestion of seeing him should have felt caring, supportive even. Instead, it felt like another move in a chess game I was only beginning to understand I was playing. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at my phone. I needed to talk to someone who knew me, really knew me, before Michael's version of reality became the accepted truth. My sister Sarah's contact information glowed on the screen, and I realized she was the only person I could trust completely right now. But as I started to dial her number, I heard Michael's voice again, drifting up from the kitchen. He was on another call, his tone once again dropping into that confidential register I'd learned to recognize. I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs, and listened as he spoke to someone new. Someone whose reaction would determine whether I had any allies left in this battle I hadn't even known I was fighting. I froze at the top of the stairs, straining to hear who Michael was talking to. The familiar cadence of his voice carried that same false intimacy I'd begun to recognize, and my stomach clenched as I realized he was speaking to someone I cared about. "I know this is hard to hear, Sarah, but I'm really concerned about her lately," Michael was saying, and my heart plummeted. Sarah, my sister, the one person I'd just been about to call for support. I pressed myself against the wall, hardly daring to breathe as I listened to him systematically poison the well of my most trusted relationship. "She's been having these episodes where she gets really paranoid and defensive," Michael continued, his voice heavy with manufactured worry. "Yesterday she accused me of things that just don't make sense. I think she might be having some kind of breakdown." The silence stretched long enough that I could imagine Sarah's shocked expression on the other end of the line. Sarah, who had been my confidant through every major crisis in my adult life. Sarah, who knew me better than anyone except the husband who was now rewriting my reality for her benefit. "I don't know what to do," Michael went on. "She won't listen to me when I suggest getting help. You know how stubborn she can be when she gets an idea in her head." That phrase hit me like a physical blow. How many times had Sarah and I laughed about my tendency to dig in my heels when I believed I was right? Now, Michael was weaponizing that familiar trait, transforming what had always been seen as determination into evidence of mental instability. I heard the shift in his voice that meant he was listening to Sarah's response, and I found myself holding my breath, desperately hoping my sister would defend me, would recognize the manipulation for what it was. But when Michael spoke again, I could tell from his tone that Sarah had taken the bait. "I'm so glad you understand," he said, relief flooding his voice. "I was worried you might think I was overreacting, but you've seen how she gets sometimes, right? That intensity she has?" My legs felt weak. Every conversation Sarah and I had ever had about my passionate nature, every moment where I'd been described as intense or driven, was being recontextualized as evidence of instability. Michael was taking the very qualities that had made me successful in my career and twisting them into symptoms of mental illness. "Could you maybe try talking to her?" Michael asked. "She might listen to you. I just want her to get the help she needs." The call ended, and I heard Michael moving around the kitchen, probably feeling quite pleased with himself. In the span of a single conversation, he had turned my sister from my potential ally into his unwitting accomplice. I sat heavily on the top step, my mind reeling. How long had this been going on? How many people in my life had already been primed to see my behavior through the lens Michael had provided? The shower I'd planned felt impossible now. Instead, I found myself analyzing every interaction I'd had recently, wondering which of my responses had been cataloged as evidence of my declining mental state. Had my frustration at the grocery store when they were out of the coffee I needed been reported as irrational anger? Had my excitement about a work project been described as manic behavior? My phone buzzed with a text message. "Sarah. Hey, can we talk later? Michael mentioned you've been stressed. Want to grab coffee this afternoon?" I stared at the message, seeing the trap within what should have been a caring gesture. If I said yes, I'd be walking into a conversation where Sarah would be watching me for signs of instability. If I said no, it would be seen as further evidence of my deteriorating condition. The bathroom door creaked as Michael climbed the stairs, and I quickly stood, smoothing my expression into something resembling normalcy. "Everything okay up here?" he asked, that same manufactured concern coloring his voice. "You've been sitting there for a while." "Just thinking," I replied carefully. Michael nodded, as if this confirmed something troubling. "Sarah texted me that she wants to see you today. I think that's a great idea. Maybe some sister time will help you feel better." The casual way he mentioned Sarah's text, as if it hadn't been orchestrated by his phone call, made my skin crawl. But I forced myself to smile. "That sounds nice," I said, though the words tasted like ash in my mouth. As I finally headed toward the bathroom, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. My face looked strained, my eyes too bright with unshed tears. Even to me, I looked like someone on the edge. And I realized with growing horror that Michael's campaign was working. He was creating the very instability he claimed to be concerned about, and soon, everyone I loved would see exactly what he wanted them to see. But as I reached for the bathroom door handle, a new thought struck me. If Michael could orchestrate this so carefully, if he could manipulate conversations and relationships with such precision, then this wasn't a recent decision. This was a long-term plan, and I was only just beginning to understand how deep it went. The hot water beat against my shoulders, but it couldn't wash away the sick feeling in my stomach. I kept replaying Michael's phone conversation with Sarah, analyzing every carefully chosen word. The shower gave me 20 minutes to think clearly, away from his watchful eyes. When I emerged, wrapped in my robe, Michael was sitting on our bed with his laptop. He looked up with that practiced expression of gentle concern. "I was thinking," he said, closing the laptop slowly. "Maybe we should consider couples counseling. I found a few therapists who specialize in stress-related issues." The suggestion should have felt supportive, but instead it felt like another chess move. I could already imagine how those sessions would go. Michael playing the patient, worried husband while I tried desperately to articulate suspicions that would sound paranoid spoken aloud. "That's thoughtful," I managed, toweling my hair. "But maybe I should focus on getting through this work project first." Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "See, this is what I'm talking about. You're always putting work before our relationship, before your health. It's not normal to prioritize a project over getting help." Every word felt like a trap. If I agreed to counseling, I'd be validating his narrative that I needed fixing. If I refused, it proved I was in denial about my problems. My phone buzzed again. Sarah. "Coffee at 2? That little place on Maple Street?" I stared at the message, knowing I had to go. Canceling would only fuel whatever story Michael had been telling her. But the thought of sitting across from my sister, watching her search my face for signs of instability, made my chest tight. "Sarah wants to meet for coffee," I said, showing Michael the text. "Perfect." His relief seemed genuine. "She's really worried about you, you know. She loves you so much." The way he said it made me wonder what exactly he'd told her. How worried was she? And about what specifically? I got dressed carefully, choosing clothes that looked put together, but not overly so. Even my outfit selection felt calculated now, filtered through the lens of what Michael might report back to others. Downstairs, I grabbed my keys and purse. Michael appeared in the doorway, still wearing that concerned expression. "Drive carefully, okay? You seemed distracted yesterday when you came home from errands." Another seed planted. Had I seemed distracted, or was he creating that memory for both of us? "I'll be fine," I said, but even to my own ears my voice sounded strained. The drive to Maple Street felt surreal. Every turn, every decision felt weighted with potential interpretation. Was I driving too fast? Too slow? Would Michael ask Sarah later how I seemed when I arrived? Sarah was already at a corner table when I walked in, and her face brightened when she saw me. But underneath the smile, I caught something else. A careful assessment. A sister's trained eye looking for cracks. "You look tired," she said as I sat down, and I wondered if that observation would find its way back to Michael. "Just busy with work," I replied, ordering a coffee from the server who approached. Sarah nodded, but her fingers drummed against her mug. "Michael said you've been under a lot of pressure lately, more than usual." There it was. I could hear Michael's voice in her words, could picture the conversation where he'd expressed his growing concerns about his wife's ability to handle stress. "Work's always stressful," I said carefully. "But I'm managing." "Are you?" Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Because if you need help, or if you want to talk about anything, I'm here. You know that, right?" The genuine love in her voice made my throat tight. Sarah was trying to help, trying to be a good sister. She had no idea she was being used as a tool in Michael's careful campaign. I wanted desperately to tell her everything, about the overheard phone call, about the growing sense that my own life was being rewritten around me. But how could I explain that her concern, her loving worry, was exactly what Michael was counting on? "I know you're there for me," I said instead, and meant it completely. Sarah smiled, but I caught her glancing at her phone. My paranoia spiked. Was she planning to text Michael an update about our conversation? Can I ask you something? I said suddenly. When Michael talks to you about me, what exactly does he say? Sarah's expression shifted, becoming guarded. He's just concerned. He loves you. But specifically, Sarah, what has he told you? She set down her coffee cup, and I could see her choosing her words carefully. He's worried that you're taking on too much, that you're not sleeping well, that you seem anxious all the time. He thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown. The words hit me like ice water. Breakdown. There it was, the word that would explain everything. My eventual anger, my protests, my desperate attempts to convince people that I wasn't losing my mind. Do you think I'm having a breakdown? I asked quietly. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I think you're struggling, and I think Michael's scared. He called me this morning practically in tears, saying he doesn't know how to help you anymore. Tears. Michael, who I'd married partly because of his steady, unflappable nature, had called my sister in tears about my mental state. The performance was more elaborate than I'd imagined. But as I sat there, holding Sarah's hand and seeing the genuine worry in her eyes, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. Michael hadn't just been planning to leave me, he'd been planning to destroy me first. The revelation settled over me like a suffocating blanket. I could see it all now, the careful construction of my supposed instability, the strategic conversations with people who loved me, the gradual erosion of my credibility before I even knew I needed to defend it. I pulled my hand away from Sarah's, suddenly needing space to breathe. The coffee shop felt smaller now, its warm lighting too bright. The cheerful chatter from other tables, a jarring contrast to the darkness unfolding in my mind. Sarah, I said slowly, what if I told you that I think Michael is manipulating all of us? Her face changed instantly, the worried sister expression replaced by something more guarded. What do you mean? I mean, what if he's been telling you I'm falling apart because he wants you to believe it? What if this whole narrative about my mental state is something he's creating? Sarah leaned back in her chair, and I could practically see her internal conflict. She loved me, but she also trusted Michael. More importantly, she'd been primed to see my accusations as symptoms rather than insights. That's a pretty serious accusation, she said carefully. Do you have any reason to think that, or are you just upset that he's worried about you? There it was. The perfect trap. Any anger I showed would be evidence of instability. Any evidence I provided would sound like paranoid delusions. Michael had crafted this beautifully. I overheard him on the phone, I said anyway, knowing how it would sound. He was talking to someone about leaving me, about how everyone already thinks I'm losing it. Sarah's expression grew more concerned, not more convinced. She was looking at me the way people look at someone they're afraid might shatter at any moment. Who was he talking to? She asked gently. I don't know. I only heard part of it. The admission felt like defeat even as I said it. Maybe you misunderstood what you heard, Sarah suggested. When people are under stress, sometimes we interpret things in ways that aren't real, I finished. Sarah, listen to yourself. You're already assuming I'm wrong, that I'm seeing things that aren't there. Doesn't that strike you as convenient? The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of years of sisterhood now complicated by doubt. Sarah traced the rim of her coffee cup with her finger, a nervous habit from childhood. I want to believe you, she said finally. But Michael called me this morning crying, actually crying. He said he's scared for you, that you've been acting paranoid and suspicious. And now, here you are, telling me he's manipulating everyone. How does that look from where I'm sitting?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I could see myself through Sarah's eyes, the wife having a breakdown, making wild accusations against a husband whose only crime was caring too much. It was brilliant in its simplicity. "It looks exactly like you wanted it to look," I said quietly. Sarah reached for her phone, and my heart lurched. "Maybe I should call him. Maybe we should all sit down together and—" "Don't." The word came out sharper than I intended, and I watched Sarah's eyebrows raise slightly. Another mark against me. "Please," I said more softly. "Just don't call him yet. Give me a chance to figure this out." "Figure what out?" I stared at my untouched coffee, watching the foam slowly dissolve into the dark liquid beneath. How could I explain that I needed to figure out whether I was losing my mind or fighting for my life? How could I make her understand that calling Michael would be playing directly into whatever game he was running? "I need to talk to Emma," I said suddenly. Sarah frowned. "Emma? Why?" "Because if Michael's been talking to you about my mental state, he might have been talking to her too. I need to know how far this has spread." "This isn't some conspiracy," Sarah said, but there was less certainty in her voice now. "Michael loves you. He wouldn't—" "Wouldn't what? Lie? Manipulate? Leave?" I met her eyes. "People do things we never thought they'd do, Sarah. People we trust." She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face as if looking for signs of the breakdown Michael had described. I wondered what she saw, whether I looked like a woman discovering a terrible truth or a woman losing her grip on reality. "Okay," she said finally. "Talk to Emma. But then I think we all need to sit down together and sort this out." I nodded, though I knew that confronting Michael directly would be exactly what he was prepared for. He'd have explanations for everything, reasonable responses to every accusation. He'd look calm and concerned, while I looked frantic and paranoid. But maybe Emma would see something different. Maybe she'd have pieces of this puzzle that I was missing. As I walked to my car after saying goodbye to Sarah, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking deeper into a maze with no clear exit. Every step I took seemed to confirm the narrative Michael had already written about me. I pulled out my phone to call Emma, then hesitated. What if she'd already been poisoned against me too? What if this conversation would only drive me further into the corner Michael had constructed? But I had to know. I had to understand the full scope of what I was up against. As the phone rang, I realized that I was about to find out whether I had any allies left or whether Michael had already won. Emma picked up on the third ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Hey, I was just thinking about you. How are things?" The casual warmth in her tone gave me hope. Maybe Michael hadn't gotten to her yet, or maybe she hadn't believed whatever he'd told her. I need to ask you something," I said, settling into my car seat. "Has Michael talked to you recently about me?" There was a pause, and I could almost hear the shift in Emma's demeanor. "What do you mean?" "I mean, has he called you, texted you, said anything about being worried about my mental health or my behavior?" The silence stretched longer this time. When Emma finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. "He might have mentioned being concerned?" My stomach dropped. "What did he say?" "Look, can we meet somewhere?" This doesn't feel like a phone conversation. An hour later, we sat across from each other at a small park near Emma's apartment. She'd chosen a picnic table under a large oak tree, somewhere private but open. I wondered if that was intentional, if she was worried about being alone with me in an enclosed space. He called me last week, Emma said, without preamble. Said he was worried about you, that you'd been acting differently. Paranoid, he said. Suspicious of him for no reason. What else? Emma shifted uncomfortably on the wooden bench. He said you'd been accusing him of things, that you thought he was hiding money, having an affair, lying about work trips. He seemed really distressed about it. I watched a squirrel scamper up the oak tree, its movements quick and purposeful. I envied its certainty about where it was going. Did you believe him? Emma hesitated. You have been different lately. More anxious, more on edge. And some of the things you said about Michael, they seemed to come out of nowhere. What things? Last month, when we had lunch, you mentioned that he'd been acting secretive. But when I asked for specifics, you couldn't really give me any concrete examples. It felt more like a feeling than actual evidence. I remembered that lunch, remembered trying to explain the subtle changes in Michael's behavior. The way he'd started taking his phone into the bathroom with him. How he'd become evasive when I asked about his day. How he'd stopped sharing little details about his coworkers in meetings. But Emma was right. When pressed for specifics, it had all sounded flimsy, paranoid. He's very good at this, I said quietly. Good at what? Making me sound crazy while positioning himself as the concerned, patient husband. Emma leaned forward, her expression serious. What if he genuinely is concerned? What if there's some truth to what he's saying? The question hit me like a physical blow. It was the same doubt that had been eating at me since yesterday, the horrible possibility that I was the problem, that my marriage was falling apart because I was losing my grip on reality. I found something, I said. Evidence that he's been planning this. Evidence of what? I told her about the notebook, about the meticulous record keeping, about the dates and incidents that painted a picture of a deteriorating wife. Emma listened without interrupting, but I could see the skepticism growing in her eyes. Did you take pictures of it? She asked when I finished. No, I was in shock. I didn't think of it. Where is it now? I don't know. Probably hidden again. Emma was quiet for a long moment, picking at a splinter in the picnic table. So, you found a notebook that documented concerning behavior, but you didn't photograph it, and now it's gone? Put like that, it sounded ridiculous. It sounded exactly like something an unstable person would claim. I know how it sounds, I said. Do you? Emma's voice was gentle but firm. Because it sounds like you're creating elaborate explanations for what might be genuine concern from people who love you? You think I'm losing it too. I think you're under a lot of stress. I think your marriage has been struggling, and instead of facing that directly, you're creating a narrative where Michael is the villain and you're the victim. The words stung because part of me wondered if she was right. What if I had been acting paranoid? What if my suspicions about Michael had been projections of my own insecurities? But then, I remembered the cold calculation in that notebook, the clinical way my emotions had been documented and catalogued. That hadn't been the work of a concerned husband. It had been something else entirely. He's leaving me, I said. He's already made up his mind, and now he's making sure that when he does, everyone will think it's justified. Emma reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Even if that's true, even if he is planning to leave, that doesn't mean there's some grand conspiracy. Sometimes marriages end. Sometimes people fall out of love. This isn't about falling out of love. This is about reputation, about making sure he comes out looking like the good guy, while I look like the unstable wife he had no choice but to leave. Why would he care that much about how it looks? The question stopped me cold. Why would Michael go to such elaborate lengths to control the narrative of our divorce? It wasn't like him to be concerned with public opinion. He'd always been direct, sometimes brutally so. Unless there was something I didn't know. Some reason he needed to be seen as the wronged party, rather than the one who chose to leave. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm going to find out. Emma squeezed my hand. What if you're wrong? What if you confront him with all of this and it turns out he really has just been worried about you? Then I'll get help, I said. I'll admit that I've been paranoid and suspicious, and I'll work on fixing whatever's wrong with me. And if you're right? I pulled my hand away and stood up from the table. Then I'll know exactly what kind of man I married. As I walked back to my car, I realized that Emma's doubts had actually clarified something for me. Everyone Michael had spoken to was now questioning my stability, my perceptions, my version of events. He'd been thorough in his preparation. But he'd made one mistake. He'd been so focused on discrediting me that he'd forgotten I might fight back. He was expecting me to crumble under the weight of everyone's concern, to accept the role of the unstable wife who needed help. Instead, I was going to find out what he was really hiding. Because nobody goes to this much trouble to leave a marriage unless there's something much bigger at stake. Something he couldn't afford for me to discover. That night, I sat in my car outside our house for 20 minutes, watching Michael through the kitchen window. He was on his laptop, typing steadily, occasionally pausing to check his phone. The normalcy of the scene made my chest tight. How long had he been planning this while going through the motions of our daily routine? When I finally went inside, he looked up with what I now recognized as calculated concern. "How was your day?" he asked, closing the laptop slightly. Not all the way, but enough that I couldn't see the screen. "Fine," I said, hanging my keys on the hook by the door. "Just ran some errands." "Did you talk to Emma?" The question was casual, but I caught the slight tension in his shoulders as he waited for my answer. He was monitoring my support system, keeping track of who I might confide in. "We had coffee," I said. "She's worried about me too." Something relaxed in his posture. "I'm glad she's looking out for you. I know I haven't been as supportive as I should be lately." The performance was flawless. If I hadn't seen that notebook, if I hadn't noticed the pattern, I would have melted at his apparent guilt and concern. "Michael," I said, moving closer to the kitchen island. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded, but his hand moved protectively toward his laptop. "Are you having an affair?" The question hung between us like a blade. I watched his face carefully, looking for any tell, any crack in the facade. "Sarah, what kind of question is that?" His shock seemed genuine, but I'd learned not to trust my ability to read him anymore. "A direct one, are you?" "No, I'm not having an affair." He stood up, closing the laptop completely now. "Is that what you think is going on here? That I'm cheating on you?" "I don't know what to think anymore. You've been distant for months. You're documenting everything I do and say. You're telling our friends that you're worried about my mental state. What am I supposed to think?" His face went very still. "What do you mean I'm documenting everything?" I'd revealed too much. The smart thing would have been to backtrack, to cover my slip. Instead, I found myself pushing forward. "The notebook, Michael. The one where you write down every time I forget something, or seem upset or act in any way that could be construed as unstable." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him calculating his response. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, the tone someone might use with a frightened animal. "Sarah, I don't have a notebook where I'm documenting your behavior. I think you might be imagining things. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost doubted what I'd seen with my own eyes. Almost. I saw it, Michael. It was in your office. Pages of entries about my moods, my reactions, times when I seemed confused or paranoid. When were you in my office going through my things? He'd turned it around, made me the one violating boundaries, the one acting inappropriately. But I could see something else in his eyes now. A flicker of calculation. That's not the point. The point is that you're building a case against my sanity. Sarah, listen to yourself. You're talking about secret notebooks and elaborate plots. You're accusing me of having an affair. You're going through my private office. Don't you think that maybe, just maybe, Emma and I have reason to be concerned? I felt the ground shifting under my feet. He was good at this, better than I'd realized. Every word was designed to make me question myself, to make my accusations sound like paranoid delusions. Show me, I said. What? Show me your office. Show me that there's no notebook. Prove that I'm imagining things. Something flickered across his face too quickly for me to interpret. Sarah, I'm not going to enable your paranoia by letting you search through my personal belongings. This has gone far enough. So, you won't show me. I won't feed into delusions, no. We stared at each other across the kitchen island, and I realized this was the moment everything changed. There was no going back from here. Either I was losing my mind, or my husband was systematically destroying my credibility to cover up something he couldn't afford for me to discover. I'm going to stay at my sister's tonight, I said. Sarah, running away isn't going to solve anything. I'm not running away. I'm getting some space to think clearly. As I packed an overnight bag, Michael hovered in the doorway of our bedroom, still playing the role of the concerned husband. Will you at least consider talking to someone? A professional? I looked at him. This man I'd shared my life with for 8 years, and realized I had no idea who he really was. I'll consider it, I said, zipping up my bag. Will you consider telling me the truth about what you're really planning? But he'd already walked away. 20 minutes later, I stood on Jessica's doorstep, wondering if I was about to find out that my own sister had also been recruited into Michael's campaign of concern. Jessica opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been watching from the window. Her face was already creased with worry, and I realized Michael had probably called ahead. Sarah, thank God. Come in. She pulled me into a hug that felt genuine, but I found myself analyzing even that simple gesture. Had Michael told her I was fragile? Unstable? Did he call you? I asked as she led me to her living room. About 10 minutes ago. He said you'd had a fight and might be coming here. Jessica settled beside me on the couch, tucking one leg under her. He sounded really worried. There it was, the seed of doubt planted with surgical precision. I set my overnight bag down and tried to read my sister's expression. Jessica had always been protective of me, sometimes annoyingly so. She'd been the one to talk me through my anxiety attacks in college, the one who'd helped me leave my terrible first job. But now I wondered if that protectiveness made her more susceptible to Michael's narrative. What exactly did he say? That you've been under a lot of stress lately, that you accused him of having an affair with Emma, and that you went through his private office. Jessica's voice was carefully neutral, the tone she used when she was trying not to take sides. Sarah, what's really going on? I stared at the coffee table, at the familiar chaos of Jessica's life scattered across its surface. Mail, her reading glasses, a half-empty coffee mug with lipstick on the rim. Normal things. Real things. It grounded me. What if I told you that Michael has been keeping detailed notes about my behavior, recording every time I seem confused or upset or paranoid? Jessica was quiet for a long moment. I'd ask why you think he's doing that? To build a case. To make everyone think I'm having some kind of breakdown so that when he leaves me for Emma, it looks justified. Sarah. Jessica's voice was gentle but firm. Do you hear how that sounds? The question hit me like a slap. It was exactly what Michael had said, almost word for word. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, searching for signs of manipulation or rehearsed responses. But all I saw was genuine concern. You think I'm losing it too? I think you're under tremendous stress. Your job has been brutal lately. You've been having those headaches, and you've seemed... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Different. For weeks now. Different how? Suspicious. Jumpy. You analyze everything anyone says to you, even me. You're doing it right now. She was right. I was cataloging her expressions, weighing her word choices, looking for hidden meanings in every gesture. When had I become this person? But I found the notebook, Jess. I saw it with my own eyes. Okay, let's say you did. What if there's another explanation? I wanted to ask what she meant, but something held me back. A growing fear that I didn't want to hear her answer. Jessica leaned forward, taking my hands in hers. Sarah, what if Michael has been worried about you, and he was trying to track your symptoms to help you? What if he's been talking to Emma because she's a nurse and he wanted professional advice? The room seemed to tilt slightly. You've thought about this. You've discussed this with someone. Michael called me last week. He was scared, Sarah. He said you'd been having memory gaps, accusing him of moving things, convinced that he was lying to you about little things. He asked if I'd noticed anything. And had you? The pause before she answered told me everything I needed to know. You've been forgetting conversations we've had. Last month, you called me 3 times about the same thing, each time convinced it was the first time you'd brought it up. And you've been so certain that people are talking about you, plotting against you. I pulled my hands away from hers. So you're all in agreement. Poor Sarah is having a breakdown. No. We're all worried that someone we love is struggling with something serious and won't get help. What if you're wrong? What if I'm not crazy and my husband really is gaslighting me to cover up an affair? Jessica was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, Then we figure that out. But Sarah, what if you're wrong? What if you're destroying your marriage and your relationships because you can't see clearly right now? I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, Jessica's neighbor was walking their dog, a completely ordinary scene that felt somehow surreal. Everything felt surreal lately, like I was living slightly outside of reality. I don't know what's real anymore, I admitted. That's exactly why you need help figuring it out. I turned back to her. You want me to see a therapist? I want you to see a doctor. A real one. Get checked out physically first. Rule out medical causes. Then yes, maybe talk to someone who can help you sort through what's been happening. And if I refuse? Then I'll support you anyway, but I won't pretend that I'm not scared for you. I sank back onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. What if I go to a doctor and they say I'm fine? What if there's nothing wrong with me medically? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. We sat in silence for several minutes. I could feel Jessica watching me, probably cataloging my behavior just like everyone else. The thought should have made me angry, but instead, I felt defeated. There's something else, I said finally. Something I haven't told anyone. Jessica waited. I've been having these moments where I can't account for time. Like, I'll be doing something, and then suddenly, I'm somewhere else doing something different, with no memory of how I got there. How long has that been happening? A few weeks, maybe longer. It's hard to tell, because by definition, I don't remember them clearly. Jessica was very still. Sarah, that's not normal stress behavior. That's something that needs to be checked out immediately. What if they find something wrong with me? Really wrong? Then at least you'll know, and you can get treatment. And what if they don't find anything? What if I really am just paranoid and suspicious, and losing my grip on reality? Then you'll get help for that too. I looked at my sister, this person who had known me longer than anyone except my parents, and realized that I trusted her more than I trusted my own perceptions right now. Will you come with me to the doctor? Of course. And will you do something else for me? What? Will you go to the house tomorrow when Michael's at work and look for that notebook in his office? Jessica hesitated. Sarah, please, I need to know if it exists. I need one other person to confirm what I saw, or to tell me definitively that it's not there. And if I don't find it, then I'll know I'm sicker than I thought. And if I do find it, I met her eyes. Then we'll know my husband has been lying to everyone about what's really going on. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll look. That night, lying in Jessica's spare bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and tried to inventory what I knew for certain. But even my most basic assumptions felt shaky now. I thought I'd seen a notebook. I thought Michael was having an affair. I thought people were conspiring against me. But what if I was wrong about everything? And what if I wasn't? The next morning, Jessica left for my house while I made an appointment with my doctor. As I hung up the phone, I realized that by evening, I'd have at least some answers. The question was whether I was prepared for what I might learn. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. I hope you slept well. I love you. We'll figure this out together. I stared at the message, searching for hidden meanings, coded threats, manipulation. But maybe it was just what it appeared to be. A message from a worried husband to his struggling wife. The uncertainty was killing me. In a few hours, Jessica would call and tell me whether the notebook existed or not. Either my marriage was built on lies, or my mind was betraying me in ways I'd never imagined possible. I wasn't sure which possibility scared me more. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. I tried to distract myself by cleaning Jessica's already spotless kitchen, then attempted to read a magazine, but the words swam on the page. Every few minutes, I caught myself checking my phone for the time. At 2:30, I couldn't stand it anymore and called Jessica. I'm not there yet, she said before I could even speak. I had to wait for him to leave. He didn't go to work until almost noon. That's weird. He's usually gone by 8. Maybe he took time off to look for you. Or maybe he was destroying evidence, I thought, but kept it to myself. Call me the second you know anything. I will. Another hour passed, then another. At 4:15, my phone finally rang. Sarah? Jessica's voice was strange. Did you find it? A long pause. I need you to sit down. My legs went weak. You found it. I found it. And Sarah, it's worse than you thought. The room seemed to tilt. What do you mean, worse? There are pages and pages. Not just about the affair, but about you, about conversations he's had with people, things he's planning to say. And there's contact information for a divorce attorney. I pressed my hand to my mouth, afraid I might be sick. "Sarah, are you there?" "What else?" I whispered. "There's a timeline. He's been planning this for months. And there are notes about your behavior, but they're all exaggerated or taken out of context. Like that time you forgot dinner plans with his parents? He wrote it down as increasingly forgetful and unreliable. When you cried during that movie last month? Emotional instability becoming more frequent. He's been building a case against me. It looks that way. Sarah, I'm taking pictures of everything." "No, don't. Just bring it. Bring the whole notebook." "I can't steal it. That would be illegal." "He's destroying my reputation, my marriage, my sanity, and you're worried about taking a notebook?" "I'm worried about protecting you legally. If this goes to divorce court, we need to be smart about how we handle evidence." Divorce court. The words hit me like a slap. Even with all my suspicions, hearing it said out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "I'm taking detailed photos," Jessica continued. "That way we have proof, but the notebook stays where it is." "He won't know we've seen it." "What about the woman? Is there a name?" Another pause. "Her name is Amanda. She works in his office. And Sarah, based on what I'm reading here, this has been going on for at least 6 months." 6 months, while I'd been trying to save our marriage, going to therapy, blaming myself for our problems, he'd been with someone else and systematically documenting my supposed mental breakdown. "I'm coming home," I said. "No, don't. Not yet. Let me finish here first. We need to be strategic about this." "Strategic?" "Jessica, my husband is planning to divorce me and make everyone think I'm crazy. What's strategic about that?" "The strategic part is proving he's been lying. About everything. Sarah, this notebook is evidence of deliberate deception. Anyone who reads this will see exactly what he's been doing." After we hung up, I sat in Jessica's living room and tried to process what I'd learned. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't paranoid or overly suspicious. My instincts had been right all along. But somehow, that didn't feel like victory. It felt like betrayal so deep I could barely breathe around it. When Jessica returned an hour later, she looked grim. She handed me her phone, and I scrolled through photo after photo of Michael's handwriting. Page after page of calculated manipulation. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Now we figure out your next move." "Because Sarah, he's planning to file for divorce next week." I stared at Jessica's phone screen until the words blurred together. Michael's handwriting, so familiar from years of grocery lists and birthday cards, now felt like evidence from a crime scene. Each calculated entry made my stomach turn more. "Sarah seemed agitated during dinner," I read aloud from one of the photos. "That was the night I asked him why he'd been working so late. I wasn't agitated. I was concerned." Jessica settled beside me on her couch, close enough that I could smell her familiar lavender perfume. "Every single entry is like that. Normal reactions twisted into something sinister." "Next week," I said, the words feeling heavy in my mouth. "He's filing next week, and I had no idea." "What do you want to do?" I set the phone down and looked around Jessica's living room. The space felt safe in a way my own home hadn't in months. Her bookshelves lined with romance novels and travel guides. The throw pillows I'd helped her pick out last Christmas. The framed photos of our college days when life seemed so much simpler. "I want to go home," I said finally. "I want to walk into my house and confront him with everything I know." That might not be the best approach. Then what is? Let him file for divorce while telling everyone I'm having a breakdown? Let him get ahead of this story? Jessica was quiet for a moment, thinking. What if we turn it around? What if instead of confronting him, you start telling people the truth first? What truth? That my husband has been documenting my behavior like I'm a lab rat? That your husband has been acting strangely? That you've been worried about him? That he's been secretive and distant, and you're concerned about his mental state? The idea stopped me cold. Fight fire with fire? Not exactly. More like fight lies with truth. Because Sarah, everything you'd be saying would be accurate. He has been acting strangely. He has been secretive. You have been worried about him. I picked up the phone again, scrolling through more photos. Page after page of Michael's careful documentation, building his case against me while I'd been trying to save our marriage. I keep thinking about therapy, I said. All those sessions where he sat there nodding sympathetically while Dr. Martinez talked about my anxiety and trust issues. He knew exactly what he was doing. That's what makes this so calculated. He's been using your genuine concerns against you. So what do I do? Call everyone he's talked to and tell them he's been lying? Start with the people closest to you, the ones who matter most. I knew she was right, but the thought of having those conversations made me feel sick. How do you tell people that your husband has been systematically destroying your reputation? How do you prove something like that without sounding exactly as unstable as he's claimed you are? I'm scared, I admitted. What if people don't believe me? What if they think this is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior he's been warning them about? Jessica took the phone from my hands and set it aside. Sarah, I've known you for 15 years. You are the most level-headed person I know. Anyone who really knows you will see the truth. But what about the people who don't know me that well? His co-workers, his family, the neighbors. Those people will see the evidence eventually. Divorces have a way of revealing the truth about people. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the situation settling around us. Outside, I could hear the evening sounds of Jessica's neighborhood. Dogs barking, children playing, the normal rhythms of life continuing while mine fell apart. I need to go home, I said finally. I can't hide here forever. You're not hiding, you're regrouping. It feels like hiding. Jessica stood up and walked to her kitchen, returning with 2 glasses of wine. Then let's make a plan, a real plan for how you're going to handle this. Okay, I said, accepting the glass. What kind of plan? First, you go home and act normal. Don't let him know you've discovered anything. Give us time to figure out the best way to use this information. Pretend everything is fine. Pretend you don't know what he's planning. There's a difference. I took a sip of wine, letting it burn slightly on the way down. This feels surreal. Like I'm planning a counterattack against my own husband. You're protecting yourself against someone who's been planning an attack against you. The distinction mattered, I realized. I wasn't the aggressor here. I was responding to months of calculated deception. What if he files before I'm ready? Then we'll deal with it. But Sarah, having this notebook gives you a huge advantage. It shows premeditation. It shows deliberate manipulation. Any lawyer would love to have this kind of evidence. Lawyer. Another word that made this feel irreversibly real. I never thought I'd need a lawyer for my marriage. You never thought your husband would document your behavior like evidence in a criminal case either. She was right. The Michael I'd married, the one I'd shared dreams and fears with for 8 years, wouldn't have done this. But apparently, that Michael had disappeared months ago, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I should go home, I said, though every part of me wanted to stay in Jessica's safe, uncomplicated living room. Are you sure you're ready? No, but I can't avoid him forever. Jessica walked me to the door, her expression concerned. Call me if you need anything at all. I will. And Sarah? Remember that none of this is about your mental state. It's about his character. I drove home through streets that looked the same as they had that morning, but felt completely different. Every familiar landmark seemed charged with new meaning, as if I were seeing my neighborhood through different eyes. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Michael's car was there, but no lights were on inside. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering courage for whatever came next. When I walked through the front door, I could hear the television in the living room. Michael was there on our couch, watching the news as if it were any ordinary evening. "Hey," he said, glancing up as I entered. "How was Jessica's?" "Fine," I replied, my voice sounding normal despite everything. "Just needed to get out for a while." "Good. I was worried about you earlier. You seemed really upset." The casual way he said it, the slight note of concern in his voice, made my skin crawl. This was exactly what Jessica had photographed. My genuine distress transformed into evidence of instability. "I'm feeling better now," I said. "I'm glad. Want to watch something together?" I looked at him sitting there, patting the couch cushion beside him like he had thousands of times before, and felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing my husband's face. "Actually, I think I'll go to bed early," I said. "I'm tired." "Okay, sweet dreams." As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I wondered if he would add this interaction to his notebook. Sarah distant and withdrawn after spending day with friend. Concerning pattern of avoidance behavior. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, stressed, exactly like someone whose mental state might be questioned. But for the first time in months, I knew the truth about why.